Have you ever wondered how big companies actually get stuff done? I mean, for decades, the answer seemed pretty simple. You have departments. Marketing does the marketing, finance handles the money, and so on. But what if that whole way of thinking, of putting everything into these neat little boxes, is actually missing the point? Today, we're going to explore a much more powerful way to look at a business. Not as a bunch of separate departments, but as a series of interconnected processes, all focused on one thing: the customer. All right, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the traditional building blocks, those business functions. Then we'll get to the real game changer, business processes. After that, we'll dive into the big problem that happens when these functions don't talk to each other. Yep, the dreaded silo effect. Then we'll see how integration is the hero of the story, creating a ton of value. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by looking at why this is a whole new way of thinking about how work gets. So, to really get where business is headed, we kind of have to start with where it's been. And for a long, long time, companies were built on a really simple idea: you organize everything by expertise. And that's where this idea of functional areas of operation comes from. I mean, really, these are just what we call departments. Think of them like different buckets you put specific types of work into. And it turns out most companies, whether they're huge corporations or just a small shop, are usually built on 4 of these main pillars. And here they are, the big 4. You've got marketing and sales. Those are the folks out there talking to customers, taking orders, and trying to guess what people will buy next. Then you have supply chain management. These are the people who actually make the thing. They buy the parts, schedule the production line, and get it all built. Of course, accounting and finance is keeping tabs on every single dollar. And finally, human resources, or HR, is managing all the people who make the magic happen. Each one has its own list of specific jobs or functions. Okay, so that departmental view, it seems logical, right? But it's missing a massive piece of the puzzle. So now let's shift our thinking away from what each department does by itself and instead focus on how work actually gets done to create something a customer wants. Okay, check this out. It's a night and day difference. A business function is something that happens inside one of those departments, like HR processing payroll. That's an internal task. But a business process? That's a whole different animal. It's a chain of activities that slices right across those department walls, all for one reason: to deliver something valuable to a customer. And that's the key right there. A process takes some inputs, say a customer's order and their money, and it runs them through a series of steps to create an output that the customer actually cares about, like getting the awesome product they just paid for. At the end of the day, for any business process, the customer is the only judge that matters. Just think about buying a computer. When you click that buy button online, you're not talking to 3 different departments. You're kicking off one single process. But behind the curtain, marketing and sales took your order, accounting and finance checked your payment, and now supply chain management is building and shipping your computer. For you, it's one smooth action. But for the company, it's this incredibly complex dance between a whole bunch of different teams. This quote just nails it. As a customer, do you really care about a company's internal structure or who reports to whom? Of course not. You just want your new phone to be cool, work perfectly, and feel like you got a fair price. And that is exactly why thinking in processes, thinking about the customer's complete experience from start to finish, is so critical. So, what happens when those departments, those functional areas we just talked about, are basically walled off from each other? What happens when they just don't communicate? Well, you get one of the biggest, most expensive problems in the business world. It's called the silo effect. Imagine each department operating as its own little kingdom, with its own separate information system, its own data, and its own agenda. And all that critical information gets trapped inside these vertical silos. It can't flow sideways to the other parts of the company that desperately need it to do their jobs. It's a mess. And hey, this isn't just some textbook theory. The luggage company Tumi lived this nightmare. Their systems for orders, for the warehouse, and for their finances were completely disconnected. The result? Total chaos. Sales had no idea what was actually in stock, and the warehouse had no clue what orders were coming down the pipe. They couldn't fill orders, they had way too much inventory just sitting there collecting dust, and they were constantly missing shipping dates. These are the kinds of failures that can absolutely cripple a business. So, what does that broken system actually look like from 30,000 feet? It looks like this. In this old functional model, information just can't flow horizontally between the people on the ground doing the work. If the sales team needs info from the warehouse, that request has to go all the way up the chain of command to a manager and then all the way back down. It's just agonizingly slow. It's a total bottleneck. Okay, so if that old, siloed model is so broken, what's the fix? How do you actually tear down those walls between departments? Well, the answer, in a word, is integration. This is the goal. In a business that thinks in processes, information flows freely and directly between the people who need it, right when they need it. The sales team can see real-time inventory levels, manufacturing knows exactly what sales is forecasting for the next quarter. This horizontal flow is the secret sauce for speed and agility. And the tool that makes all this magic happen is an integrated information system. The best way to think about it is like a shared digital brain for the entire company. Instead of every department having its own separate spreadsheet, now everyone is working from the exact same single source of truth. This whole idea is the foundation of what we call Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP, software. So let's see how this actually works. With an integrated system, marketing and sales is no longer on an island. It's constantly pulling in vital information, like how much a product costs to make from accounting, or what the production schedule looks like from supply chain. And in turn, it's pushing out its own critical data, like sales forecasts that help HR figure out who to hire. It's this living, breathing exchange of information. And what about a department that's right in the middle of all the action, like supply chain? Well, it is a huge consumer of data. It absolutely needs those sales forecasts to know what to build, it needs cost data from finance to manage its budget, and it needs to know about labor availability from HR. And in return, it's providing the production plans and inventory data that pretty much everyone else in the company relies on. You know, one of the biggest wins here is just pure efficiency and accuracy. Because everyone is tapped into the same system, data only gets entered one time, right at the source. A salesperson enters a new order and bam, that single action instantly feeds all the info needed to manufacturing, shipping, and accounting. This just crushes the number of errors and gets rid of a ton of redundant, soul-crushing data entry. So here's the really important part. This is not just about installing some new software. This is where technology forces a massive cultural shift inside a company. To really make this work, you have to fundamentally change how you view your business and what your mission is. When you start focusing on the whole process, you're forced to see your business the way your customer sees it. The main question isn't, how is my department doing anymore? The main question becomes, how well are we, as one unified team, delivering an amazing experience to our customer? So you can see the shift pretty clearly. We're moving away from this narrow internal focus on just your department's duties. And let's be honest, fighting turf wars. The new and much better way is to get everybody rallied around that end-to-end process that starts with and ends with making a customer happy. And that really brings us to the final thought here. As a customer yourself, what do you actually care about? The neat little boxes on some company's org chart, or the quality and the speed of the service you actually get? The answer is pretty obvious, right? And that's why understanding this shift from functions to processes is one of the most powerful changes in modern business.